A journey with intention and never fail to mention that we go hard every time we go in. Everything I'm feeling must be something I've been missing.
Welcome to the fourth episode of Book Babes Read. Thank you all for tuning in. Today we're continuing our theme of self-help / self-growth. Before we do that, I'll have the ladies introduce themselves. I'll begin. I'm Danica.
Hey y'all, I'm Bridget.
Hi, I'm Takesha.
And I'm Erin.
So today we will be discussing 13 Things Mentally Strong Women Don't Do by Amy Morin. Amy Morin is a psychotherapist and the international best-selling author of 13 Things Mentally Strong Parents Don't Do and 13 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do. Her articles attract over 2 million readers every month. She travels the world to talk about mental health and to talk about how to stop doing things that rob you of becoming the best version of you. So ladies, Amy explains what it means and what it takes to be a mentally strong woman. Two of the things on her list are mentally strong women don't compare themselves and mentally strong women don't insist on perfection. So Bridget, would you like to pick one of these and discuss?
Sure. One of those that stuck out to me is that mentally strong women do not compare themselves to other people, especially since we live in like the day of age of like social media and like you're always scrolling through Instagram, seeing the Instagram models and like seeing all these things that do not look like you at all. So that definitely stuck out to me because it made me wonder like how many times do I look at these images of like these perfect women and wonder why am I not that perfect woman? I do know that a lot of times I look at it and I use it as like my benchmark. Like some people I screenshot like Drea or Tiana Taylor and I'm like, these are my body goals. I'm about to be out here in the gym. So I do see where you can lose yourself in that comparison, but I also can see where you can use it as a stepping stone to want to improve things that you don't want or you don't like about yourself.
For me, I also thought about comparing like your life, like the stage that you're at in your life. So, you know, we're at a certain age where some people are getting married, some people are engaged, and some people are pregnant with a baby, and some of us are just chilling. and so it's like, sometimes you might compare yourself to a friend. Maybe you might think like, wow, why don't I have a kid right now, you know? And so I was thinking that like, it's hard not to do, but we do it all the time. It comes up, even though you don't want to think about it. Sometimes it comes up. So that's how I thought about it. And then I also thought about like the Instagram stuff, but I ain't concerned about that.
I know for me personally, I've had to take social media breaks because I felt like it was over consuming in my life, and it started to play into a lot of the things that she discussed in the book, like not feeling like you were good enough because you were watching this person get promoted, that person was getting engaged, and it's like, well, damn, I done applied to 10 jobs and I'm still sitting at the same job that I do not want to be at. And so it started creating this environment for me of feeling stuck. And then it started making me wallow a little bit more in my own misery because I was watching everyone else succeed. And not to say that I wasn't happy for everyone. I was happy. Yeah. I clicked the like button and everything. But it definitely does rob you of a lot of joy when you start to compare your lives to what appears to be the life of someone, because that's the thing that we don't really discuss, is that people on social media are not always as happy as they seem. If you go on my social media, like 2 years ago, I was in a really miserable place. I'm smiling in every picture. I look like I was out here living. I was traveling. Like, you would never see me post like, damn, I'm really having a bad day with tears dripping down my eyes. So it paints this unrealistic picture that we're absolutely happy, and it's not necessarily a true comparison anyway.
Of course, as Bridget said, like living in the age of social media, it's hard not to compare yourself to others. I mean, you see like these 19-year-old millionaires who are self-made millionaires.
Is that a shot?
And it's just like, but
Self-made.
I'm out here working hard. I mean, I went to school, I got good grades, and I'm just working my regular job. But for me, I definitely agree that if you are mentally strong, you don't compare yourself. You don't compare yourself to others at all. I don't even use it as like a benchmark anymore, because there was one point where I was following Brittany Babe. you know her. And she has some abs. And I was like, I want those abs. And for me, I'm not working out all the time. I'm a teacher. I get up very early in the morning. By the time I get home, it's evening. I cook at home. I have to clean my house. It's not realistic for me to spend hours in the gym to achieve that body, nor is it really realistic for my point in life right now to even like monitor my eating habits the way, you know, some people might do in order to achieve a certain look. So I have to like do what's realistic for me and be happy with what I have regardless. I always think about this quote that Drake made where he said that God is playing favorites. And in a way, I feel like God is playing favorites for me too. And my life is nothing like Drake's. So when it comes to like comparing yourself to other people, I think you just have to be grateful and thankful for what you have and satisfied with what you have and not compare what they have, because they might have something that you're not dealing with, something that's negative that you're not experiencing. And I don't want that. I don't want that pressure. I don't want those trolls on my page, death threats and things like that. So, you know, comparing yourself to others when you don't know the other side of their story is very unhealthy.
And also, a lot of times I think people discount the journey of getting to that place, right? So, like, a lot of people went through a lot of struggles, and again, that they did not post. You never see it until it's the end result of something good that they don't discuss. So that's why it's just a very unhealthy habit to compare yourself. I completely agree with her on that one.
So another thing she discusses is mentally strong women do not overthink things. I am an overthinker.
Chronic overthinker.
Yeah, and so I start to create all sorts of problems for myself when I'm overthinking. I start creating like these scenarios. Like, no, it's really bad. And- yeah, and so Amy suggests that if you're an overthinker, maybe you should schedule a time to overthink. So let's say I'm going to schedule a time, 8 to 8:30 p.m., and this is the only time that I'm going to like think about my problems, try to come up with a solution. And that's the only point in the day that I will like think about the issues or whatever it is that's causing me to overthink. I don't know if that would work for me. I don't know how realistic it would be for me to wait until 8:30 p.m. to think about the issues that I'm having for the day. I don't know. Do you guys think this is something that...
You know what it makes? When I read that line, it made me realize how unrealistic it is to spend so much time overthinking. Because if you have to schedule a time to overthink things, maybe you thinking too much about this. Like, it just sounds so ridiculous. And I was like, dang, well, maybe she's right. Maybe you shouldn't be overthinking if you got to schedule time in your day to overthink. It just seemed unrealistic.
Sorry, but it happened to me today, so I had to write an email to someone, and all my colleagues are telling me, just write, you haven't made up your mind yet. That's it. And I'm like, no, that's not professional. I like emailed Erin like 2 screenshots, like, what do you think of this? Should I? And it was like too much. One of my colleagues was like, yo, just send the email. Like, it's not that serious. And so, yeah, it's one of my issues.
I mean, I have the exact same issue. Like, I'll probably rewrite something like 5 times, and then I still won't send it because it'll never be good enough. And I also think overthinking sometimes causes me to have anxiety. I'll wake up in the middle of the night in a full-blown panic attack because I didn't do something I said I was going to do that day. Do I think I need an overthinking time slot? It would not work for me. I'm not going to be, I would try it. Maybe it would work. I highly doubt that I could wait to overthink. But I agree with Bridget. It made me think immediately when I read that, like, damn, I spent a lot of time in my own head, like making up these elaborate stories, and nobody ever said that.
Yeah.
Literally nobody said that.
Right. That's what well, she also says, like, when you give yourself a break from whatever the issue is, you might come up with a better solution. Yeah. So, like, that's the point of that, too. So maybe while you're overthinking, you're creating all of these different scenarios that no one ever said. You're making things up. But if you give your mind that break, you might come up with a better solution later when you have a clearer head. So that's one of the reasons why she said to schedule the time. But I don't know if that would work for me either.
Speaking of anxiety, I don't know if I ever mentioned this, but a couple of years ago, I went to the doctor because I was having like heart palpitations. I'm like, my heart is beating really fast. I'm having trouble breathing. People were even commenting on it, like, oh, you seem out of breath. And the doctor told me, I think you have anxiety. And I was like, no, something's going on. I need a chest x-ray. So I'm like, no, it can't be. Had a chest x-ray. Everything was okay. I think I might have had two. I have anxiety, and it's because I overthink. And so, like, it was a serious topic for me, and I had to really think about it. So even though it seems unrealistic, I'm definitely going to try to, like, set aside time to overthink because now my health is compromised. And, you know, overthinking can be really dangerous. You spend a lot of time in your head, and it affects your body. So it's just something to think about because, well, not something to think about. Something to think about between 8:30 and 9:30. Because it can lead to anxiety. And anxiety is a real thing that we don't talk about enough, but it really impacts your body, and stress is deadly. So
You ain't lying, because I went to the doctor the other day and she was like, are you stressed? I don't know, maybe it was my blood pressure that was high, and that day was a very stressful day. So yeah, no, you're right. All right, so another thing on her list is mentally strong women don't downplay their success. And she goes into great detail. You're laughing. You want to start us off?
okay. Yeah. So I've been having anxiety lately. I was offered two positions at work, two new positions, and I started thinking, did I fake my way into this? Like, am I gonna be able to really do this job? I'm like, I think that they think I'm better than I am. I was thinking this. I'm like, maybe they don't really know what's going on, and it came to the point where I was having anxiety, and I'm like, I'm not that good. So, and when people say like, oh yeah, that was great, I'm like, no, it was that person's idea. I do almost everything she said you do when you downplay your success. And it's scary because then it goes into self-doubt, which is another topic that she talks about. And I'm like, I don't want to seem arrogant, and I don't want to seem like, like I'm bragging, but maybe that's really unhealthy of me because it's leading me to doubt that I'm able to take on either one of these positions. So that really hit home for me.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing. In the last tape, one thing I discussed is that I feel like I'm constantly thrown into things, right? And that's usually how I gain my success. So when I first joined, first of all, I had full-blown panic attacks, like, oh my God, I can't believe that they think that I'm supposed to be here, right? After that, I started looking into stuff for blacks. And somebody else nominated me. They asked me if I wanted to run. I said, yeah, sure. But in my mind, I was like, I'm definitely not about to submit my name. Someone else nominated me and threw me into it. And even as I took on the vice chair role, I found myself downplaying my success all the time. So like great events would come out, impactful, meaningful things that someone would say, and I'd be like, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. Like, it only took me this little bit of time. Like, everything was not about me stepping into the position of power and enjoying myself doing what I was supposed to be doing. Like, I still struggle with that. And it does play right into self-doubt, because then I start to think, oh, I can't do this. I'm not as good as they're saying. Like, it's always like someone else is telling me I'm good, and then I can't necessarily believe it. It never fully sinks in for me, still today.
You can go now. Okay. I definitely agree. I find myself not having the words or feeling awkward when people compliment me on things.
Yeah.
So plenty of times, like in my profession, I'm just standing there like, thank you. I mean, I found it online, like, or things like that. Or even like personal things, when people compliment me about my hair or like certain things, I'm just like, oh, okay, it was nothing. I found a YouTube video. Like, I never accept the fact that, you know what, you're damn good at this. Yeah. Because I don't know how to respond to those compliments and how to respond to that success.
That's the thing I think is weird about it. And I didn't really think about it until I was reading the book. Like, that chapter, I think, was one of my favorite chapters because it really made me stop and self-evaluate and think about how many times someone said something good to me and I didn't just say thank you.
Right.
And it made me think about how I felt like I didn't deserve the praise that I was getting. And it's like, why don't you? You actually did that. So I don't know, that chapter for me was a lot, and it's the last chapter, so it was like I already was like into it, and then that last chapter stole my heart, so.
She says it's heightened for minorities, that's all I want to say. She says
Yeah.
it's heightened for minorities.
And then imagine being a minority and a woman, right? Like, it's just double.
Yeah. So my experience with that, actually, I was telling a friend, I kind of like brushed something off, something that was like, I guess he would consider really good. And this is like 3 days ago, and he says to me, why do you always do that? And I'm like, do what? And he's like, you always like minimize all the great things that you're doing. I'm like, no, I don't. He's like, you just did an amazing PD, a professional development session, and you're saying like, oh, it was nothing. Like, do you know how many people really can't do it or they can't do it well? And you have all this knowledge that you're sharing. And I was just like, wow, I do that a lot. And I don't want to come off as like I'm bragging, you know? And then to read that chapter in the book, I was like, oh my God, this is me. The whole chapter. I'm like, this is exactly what I do all the time. I don't mean to do it. It's just that I don't want to make people feel a way about all the things I've done, you know? And I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. And so I think I also lose the words. I don't, you know, it's just a weird space to be in sometimes.
You know what it made me think of? How many white men specifically don't do that, right? Like, they don't. So we have these things, it's called community-based incentive, right? And that's basically where you're supposed to share your workout with people and it'll give you an incentive, like there's like a bonus attached to it. And I think about how many times I see people just throwing ideas out there, right? I get so nervous to throw even the smallest idea out there, but I watch my coworkers do it countlessly and all the time, and it doesn't affect them in the same way. Like, I don't think any one of them ever stops and thinks so hard about sending out something as I do.
Yeah.
And I think,
No, go ahead.
I think you hit on something very deep when you said that you don't want to make other people feel uncomfortable. And that makes me think about, like, why do I not have those words? Because you don't want to seem like you're overshining somebody else. And she talked about that. Like, women are more willing to seem humble than to praise themselves or celebrate their success. It's because you really want everyone else around you to feel comfortable. You don't want to downplay what anybody else has contributed, which is sad because then it's like, but you're doing an amazing job. So.
Part of the chapter also talks about how sometimes women don't feel like they're qualified enough, because the example that she gives talks about how that person didn't feel like they were qualified. And I also think that that's heightened for women of color. I know that I've experienced that myself, where I'm like, yes, I do have 2 degrees, and so does he, and so does, you know, maybe that white woman, but I feel like my 2 degrees are not as valuable as their 2 degrees. And that's just something to think about, because with, you know, I still have the same accomplishment, the same success, and I'm downplaying it because I don't feel like it's as good. So I think that is another aspect of feeling like you're downplaying your own success, because at the end of the day, we both walked across the stage and we both have the diploma.
There was like one more thing. Like, so we're talking about like our professional careers, but she also said that women downplay their success because, like, when they're dating, they don't want to overshadow the man.
I can see that being very true.
So like they kind of like dumb down everything that they've done so that they're not like, I guess, like overshadowing him. Happens a lot, right? Men are intimidated by strong women. And if we're looking for a spouse, you might not want to. I mean, I don't want a guy that I'm going to intimidate, you know.
Sure don't.
But it happens a lot. They hear you have 2 degrees, you have a career, you're making this amount of money, you're doing all of these things, and they could be doing that and more, but still feel intimidating. So that's another reason why women, you know, they downplay their success.
That's scary, though. Like, why would you, as a man, not want a woman who's as successful as you? like someone who, or more, right? Like, and why wouldn't you want to raise children with that type of person, right? Because that's only going to be further instilled within the children that you raise. And so it's a really scary thought, I think, that there are some men out there who don't want to deal with a powerful woman. And then they'll give it labels like angry or whatever it is, or she's too passionate about this. And it's like, I have the same level of passion as you. We both making the same, if not more, whatever. But like, why is it not a good thing if it's on my end?
Society hasn't caught up yet.
They need to hurry up.
Yeah. So, are there any other topics that really stood out to you on the list? You have one?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, but I need the back of the book. So excuse me. Okay, the one that I really, really liked was they don't see vulnerability as a weakness. So I would say for me, I've struggled a lot in the vulnerability, the whole thing. I don't even know where to begin, right? I started reading a book by Brene Brown. It's called Daring Greatly. In her book, she's a shame, guilt, everything expert. And she basically talks about how when you open up and you're vulnerable, people are able to see you. And when people see you, then it helps you to succeed. So actually not being vulnerable hampers you. So I've learned, I think, a lot about vulnerability within the last year or so, and just how being vulnerable will allow you to be your authentic self, which then allows you to step into greatness. So I would love to know your thoughts, ladies, on what you think about vulnerability being a weakness and why it's seen that way, and then how you kind of incorporate that within your lives, with it not being a weakness.
I think, unfortunately, vulnerability has been seen as a weakness. And so you have, I'm going to think of a character from House of Cards, Claire. If you've watched House of Cards, then you know that Claire is basically a monster. And I think that part of that is because I don't think she really is one, that if she doesn't play that role, she's seen as weak. And it's really unfortunate that women are in the position where they don't feel that they can be vulnerable and have power at the same time. I think we saw it with like Hillary Clinton. I mean, when she was campaigning, there are times when she was sick and people are like, oh my gosh, she's sick, she's not going to be able to do this. And so they have to then put on this persona, wear this armor where they can't be themselves, which then ends up being a problem when it comes to being a mentally strong woman. I know for me, I think I kind of wear my heart on my sleeve. When they talked about like crying at work, I've cried with my students. It is what it is, but I do feel sometimes I have to be guarded so that people don't think that I'm too weak.
Interestingly enough, like maybe 2 years ago, I had two coworkers who were kind of in a battle with each other. They were living together. The room situation wasn't going well, but they had already been friends before that situation started to blow up. One day, one of them came to my desk, and she starts talking, and it goes right into a cry. My immediate reaction, because I saw vulnerability, not necessarily as a weakness, but others perceived it as a weakness, was to grab her and run away. And then the second day, the other girl came to my desk, cried again, and I did the exact same action. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I don't know how I would have handled the situation differently, but I don't necessarily feel like I handled it right. But I dealt with it with the tools that I had, which was thinking, oh my God, if these men see them cry, they'll never be able to succeed at this job. And so now just thinking back on it, it's like, that. I don't know if that was the right move. I don't know if it was the wrong move either, but it's just something to think about, because we are taught to cry. Like, that's one thing she said in the actual chapter, is that little girls are taught to cry when they're younger, and then when we get older, they tell us don't cry. It's such a contradiction.
It is.
So what am I supposed to do when I feel like crying? Don't? That don't make no sense.
Cry.
I'm gonna cry. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm gonna cry.
You're gonna cry.
I'm gonna have to cry.
Yeah. All right. Bridget, do you want to add or?
I guess, yeah, I'll add to it. I'll add to it by saying that I know for myself, like the whole idea of not crying and having that idea of like the strong Black woman has always been like a persona from like growing up that I still kind of hold on to, but still trying to break that barrier of it. So I also have a friend who cries a lot at work, and I'm always like, you can't be letting these white people see you cry. Like that's how I see it. I'm not even thinking about just men. I'm thinking about across color lines. Like, you are a woman of color in this field, and you don't want to seem vulnerable or weak, so you can't let these people see you cry. And when you're just saying that, I'm like, wow, that just popped in my head. Like, oh my gosh, I got to stop saying that, because it is okay for you to have those emotions, right? But then also thinking about how that bleeds into personal relationships as well, because even in personal relationships, it's okay for me to express anger. But when I'm sad or I'm actually hurt or my feelings are hurt, I never express that. So being vulnerable is important.
It is, but then I wonder, so if you're like crying at work, because I'm a crier at home, right? At work, I'll like keep it in until I get to the car, which has actually happened. And so I'm just wondering, like, because of the society that we live in, let's say you do start crying at work, and now people view you as weak. Your supervisor views you as weak, like, oh, she can't handle it. Like, what would you do in that situation?
I think you should address it head on with your supervisor. If you start to see the changes and shifts in behavior, I would probably say to them, like, this crying doesn't make you weak. Crying is not a weakness. I have a coworker, and sometimes she cries. And when she cries, I feel like she's strong, because it takes a lot to cry in front of a group of people that really you don't know how they're going to react. So I've never seen her cry and thought, damn, like, why she keep crying? I always think, damn, that shows a lot of strength, and she's very emotionally tied to it, and I appreciate it. So if your supervisor thinks that, then I don't know, that's probably not a good place, and it probably has a trash work environment, so you need to go anyway.
Okay, you're crying in the bathroom, you cry in front of people, but your work product is still getting done. It's not like you crying and then, oh, all this work is done, I'm not doing nothing. You getting work done. As long as your work ethic is still the same, you have your moment, you let out your emotions, you're vulnerable, and then you get back to work, everything's fine. What is the problem?
With that being said, let's transition to Rate That Book. Rate That Book is a segment where we rate the book on a scale of 1 to 5, and we use one adjective to describe the book. So we must choose wisely. Y'all ready?
Yes.
All right. So I'll begin. Practical.
Inspirational.
Affirming.
Thought-provoking.
All 4s.
Wow. That's a first.
That's a first. Well, there you have it. 13 things mentally strong women don't do in a nutshell. We really hope that you enjoyed this episode. Our next theme will be poetry. So we will be reading lots of poems. And the first of the 2 books is Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur. So if you want to join in, make sure you pick up the book.
Make sure you guys like and subscribe, and leave some feedback in the comments below. What do you think about mentally strong women, and what are some things that they should not do?
That's it. We're good?
We're good.
All right, bye.
Please, no, the clock will tick. So while you get lit, focus on your grind. You'll reach your prime. When it's your time, will you remember? Remember, you shine. 2 separate styles fight the mesh within the anguish. Misunderstood, unable to speak each other's language. Where the symmetries align, I have hopes been crushed. Loyalty, while our eyes wide shut on some Stanley Kubrick. Life's a puzzle like a rubrics in which you begat these other notes flat. Sing your soul and